on, Foxy. It's your birthday. Not for real, just for play. This is Cree Summer, and Moana Nui will be right back.
Good evening, everyone. How are y'all feeling? Welcome to another episode of THIStory, which focuses on hidden history, this story. And I'm your host for tonight, Joyce Stevens. I'm joined by my co-host, James, also known as Miles Simmons online. And tonight we have a very special guest. I'd like to introduce to you all Dr. Fritz Galette. Fritz, if you would come off mute and make yourself known.
Hello, well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to a lively chat. Let's see where you take me.
You know, that's what I love about the conversation, especially amongst this group of people, is we don't know where we might go. We know where we have a destination in mind. The journey could be a little winding. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. So for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, THIStory was created to be a discussion on various forms of cultural history, you know, especially in today's climate where things are being overlooked, erased, discounted, just flat out lied about. How do we preserve the culture of days past? How do we keep the stories alive? How do we remember what really happened? That sort of thing. And so even beyond the recent climate, there's always been this negligence, if you will, of the history of marginalized communities. So that's what this podcast is about bringing to light different stories, background history of marginalized people, because everyone has contributed to this country, this nation, this continent, this world. And let's talk about it. So we're going to do that tonight, but then again, we're not going to do that tonight because I want to do a little bit more of the why. So I spent God knows how many years in sales for big Fortune 500 companies. And we all used to say that if you want to convince somebody of something, you need to tell them why. What's the why? It's a Simon Sinek or Simon Sinek, however you say his last name. It's Simon's big theory that got him real popular on a TED Talk, selling the why. And so tonight we're going to focus on the why. Why is it important to maintain this history that can sometimes be lost or overlooked? What does it matter? Who cares? I mean, it's in a book somewhere, right? Why talk about it? Why share it? And so tonight we're going to talk about why it's important to talk to your grandparents, right? Talk to your aunt and uncles, talk to the people that went before, right? So James, I'm going to bring you in first and ask you, what things have you learned in your lifetime that weren't in a book, and where'd you learn it from? Anything like that?
So, I'm going to say basically everything growing up around my grandparents, because I was, up until they passed at various stages of my life, I was literally around them in some way, shape, or form regularly through my adolescent life up until I graduated high school, for those who even survived past me graduating high school. But my paternal grandfather I was pretty much with him for about a good 6-7 years straight every Saturday, because he was always taking me to my Boy Scout meetings when I was in the Scouts. So he would often tell me things as far as that was pretty much a lot of my understanding of race relations and how people of color are treated, especially Black folks, Black men specifically, are treated. He told me of a time when he was roughly my age, about 12 or so at the time, and he was with his father driving somewhere, and a cop pulled him over. No reason to pull them over, but just, routine check, and walked up to his father's side of the vehicle and said, "Boy, where are you going?" To which his father calmly addressed the officer. "He's a boy. I'm a man." you know, and I didn't
This
understand
had
it
to
at
have
the time.
been this had to have been in the 1920s. If this
Mhm.
is your grandfather's father, right?
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah, or earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. So, didn't understand it at the time, the gist of the story, until I got older into my high school years and became more aware, more engaged. I shouldn't say engaged, but becoming more, um, yeah, more aware of the racial dynamics.
Mhm.
Um, because for the most part, growing up, I went to private school my entire life, but those private schools were majority Black kids up until I got to high school.
Hmm.
Then there was a balance of there was many Black kids as white kids in the school. The minorities basically were the Asian and the Latinos
Mm.
when I got to high school. So watching that whole dynamic was not so much a culture shock because I was aware of certain things, but other things were pretty much thrust upon me with zero warning whatsoever, and me having to adjust. So for my grandparents, it's pretty much just what life was like in 20s, 30s, 40s that you're not going to find in the book. How they survived in the Great Depression is not really for families of color. That information is not in the book. So anytime you read a history book about life during the Depression was, you know, people struggled to find work and do this and do that, and they went out every day and picked, soup lines and all that stuff.
Mhm.
That was for the white people. That's what they did. The people of
Yep.
color, pretty much, whether it was the Blacks, the Latinos, the Asians, that they pretty
Native
much
Americans.
ranks and became a community amongst themselves. So there was no going to soup kitchens. They were feeding each other, because at that point, they were all we were all in the same neighborhood. They weren't separating us to try to pick out the fair-skinned ones to pretty much, hey, you can pass, so we're going to let you have a little bit more than them, type thing. There was more of a sense of community and bonding and helping each other along the way, as far as like when the women were pretty much getting what the only jobs they can get at the time were like housekeeper,
Washerwoman, seamstress.
that's right. They were making sure the other women in the community were, getting those opportunities as well. So it wasn't just like, oh, the Black women are doing this. No, they were helping out the Latino women. They were helping out the Asian women as well, letting them know those type of things. So that's how you get that sense of community, which is completely opposite of what it is today. And those are the type of things I would hear from, whether it was my grandmother or my grandfather, from what life was like during those periods of times, is, when they were children, watching their parents go through this. So, and again, you won't find those in any book unless it is a book you go to a library to purchase or a bookstore to buy, type thing. But not your textbook won't have that.
Fritz, you wanted to add anything?
I'm just reminded in a moment of how I was looking forward to this conversation, because James, your experience is similar in some ways to mine, but also very different. I'm the son of Haitian immigrants who came to the country. Came to the U.S. in the early 1960s, did well enough for themselves. Back in that day, you could, at a middle class salary, buy a house. My father was a machinist for the shipping industry at one point, and then the MTA. And my mother became a nurse. So we had a house in Brooklyn, right on East 23rd Street and Avenue D, on the side of Flatbush, that is away from the historic houses that are worth millions of dollars right now. We had a regular middle class house. And my parents made sure that I got sent to the Catholic, so we went to Catholic schools. But there's a lot of how my existence was structured where I didn't actually spend a whole lot of time with the elders. I spent a lot of time in white spaces and didn't learn Haitian Creole like I would want to at this point. And had an experience and a memory of growing up that recently, in the last 10 years, I've been going back to the elders and asking them questions about why we did the things that we did and why we did them the way we did it. Because I have a memory and experience of my upbringing that I'm learning that unless I go back and talk to the elders, James, not in the books,
Right.
it'll be lost. I give an example is my parents didn't let me play in the streets with the kids that were playing skelly and basketball because those kids came from the apartment buildings and we came from the houses.
Classism. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And at first I thought they were overprotective and all of that came with that. But then I learned from my sister in recent years as I've asked her, why'd they separate us? Why'd they do that? She says, yeah, they were super protective, but they are also from Haiti. And I was like, what does that mean? Well, in Haiti, we were also separated, but I didn't know that history. And in Haiti, we were private and we kept to ourselves, not just because the kids in the street could be dangerous, but the secret police could come and get you. My parents had the trauma of the Haitian secret police, the Tontamaku. And so those, you talk about generational trauma getting transmitted, a lot of the way that my existence was set up wasn't just classism.
Mm-hmm.
It was also trauma from being in a country where if you did or said the wrong thing, in a country that's mostly all black, you still could disappear.
Yeah.
And it's gotten me, now I'm a psychologist, that's why I'm called doctor. And part of what I do when somebody comes to me for the first time is I get them to tell me their story. And in a lot of what they're telling me in their story, they're telling me why they came there for the first time, the problems that they came to address, and a lot of the work of getting their story over the course of time, over the course of sessions, is to help really understand the deeper narrative. And what often happens is in getting them to start to talk about the narrative, they start to realize some there are elements of that narrative that they never fully understood, hadn't fully processed.
Right.
And it's not uncommon for me to ask them to go back and talk to a parent or a sibling or an elder, and they'll come back and they go, I think I remember that whole experience differently than my elders do. And I've had that experience where I've gone to my sister who's 4 years older, and she'll tell me, oh, I know you were there for part of it, but let me tell you all that happened. And there I'm finding out that there's so many histories that I didn't know were impacting me, that when I talk to the elders, it's not in the books. I learn a little bit more about myself. And so that's exactly what I do as a therapist, is I get people to investigate their own stories, because their stories are affecting. Our stories are traumas. Give it another anecdote. My father, it sort of starts with me, is I always tend to dress up. Like, this is actually dressed down for me. I feel a little uncomfortable, especially when I'm in public spaces, if I'm not dressed up a little bit more. I've worked on this, so I'm a little bit more comfortable than I used to be. But then one day I saw a picture of my father in 1974 standing with his friends, and he was dressed up compared to them. And in investigating that story, it was that my father always felt that if he wasn't dressed to the nines, he could get pulled over. He still got pulled over. He could be singled out. He still could attract trouble, but he attracted less than a lot of our other relatives because he was always the best dressed in the room. And apparently I took that in. And so all through grammar school, when the kids could wear a tie and a sweater, I was always in a blazer in our parochial school.
Wow. And didn't even realize where you were getting that from, just doing as you saw, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting. I've had a couple of epiphanies while y'all were talking around, these stories and this history that we have that are not in the books. And I'm about to make a lot of circles here, so stick with me. But I remember talking to my grandfather. It was an assignment in either middle school or say 5th grade elementary school, like somewhere around there. And they said, take a, cassette tape recorder and go talk to your grandparents and get their story of them growing up. And I had both my grandparents sitting there, and they told me this amazing history of their life, of coming from the country outside of Houston, Texas, Huntsville, Texas, which is about an hour north of Houston. And typical high school, lovebirds. She got pregnant, they got married, and so came to Houston to find a better job, better life. Lost the baby. And so this is where things get really interesting, because my grandmother was like, I wouldn't have married him if hadn't had to. So after the baby was lost, she said she cried for the whole first year of them being married because she didn't want to marry him. But they were married until the day they died. Right. So when we think about people saying, we don't have loyalty like our parents and grandparents. She ain't like him, but she ain't had nowhere else to go. And so that shaped me, from an early age. She told me the rest of that later on in life, but I remember her saying that that's why they got married and came to Houston. She got pregnant again, had my mother, so on and so forth. But they would talk. Now, this is in the 1930s, right? Because my mom was born in like 36 or 38, somewhere in there. And my grandfather talked about making 25 cents a day as a caddy on a golf course, because everybody wanted, the young black man to carry their golf bag or whatever. 25 cents a day from the golf course, but a nickel a ball for jumping in the lake to get balls out when the white man would lose their ball. Here's a nickel, go get my ball out of the water. So he was wet all day, but he was pulling in like $1 from jumping in the lake and only 25 cents from the actual job. So side hustle comes naturally, in my line. I'm hustling now, as a matter of fact. But to go on, I remember him, he said a lot of things, but the one thing that I remember him saying is, we ain't never had no money. We was always happy though. And the thought of that, of how we are so tied in today's society of, they say money can't buy happiness, but I sure like to try, and all these other things about being tied to materialism and capitalism. And if you don't have this, you're not making it. Success is measured by the number of zeros in your bank account. And here's my grandfather with $1 and totally fine, totally happy. And to your point, Dr. Fritz, they had an apartment for a long time. They ended up buying a house, I think, when my mom was maybe 10 or 15 years old, which again, this would have been the 1950s-ish in America. And as you were talking, James, around the history of your family, and I'm hearing Dr. Fritz with the history of his family and the differences between being born in America or being first generation in America, Haiti versus US, and trying to, I hear a lot of first generation immigrants, children, talk about not speaking their native language, because they wanted to come here and be an American. We're going to let all this go and be American, and the attempts to assimilate, not from a negative space or from some people nowadays might say, oh, it was self-hate. It wasn't from that. It was, this is what we thought had to happen in order for us to be a part of the American dream. So let's only speak English. I have a friend whose boyfriend doesn't speak anything but English, and his parents only speak Mandarin and Cantonese. And so they speak a little bit, but they struggle to talk to their own son because they refuse to teach him their language. They wanted him to learn English with no accent. I have some Hispanic friends that learn English with no accent, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, you're still not one of them. And that society makes sure that they let you know you're still not one of them. That takes me back to what you were saying, James, especially because Sinners just came out, and Sinners is on my mind all day, every day. If we think about the history that isn't told in books around all of these prosperous Black towns, prosperous cities, it's so much bigger than just Rosewood and Tulsa. There were hundreds of Black towns that thrived in the 1920s and 30s. And if you think about what was happening in white society, which we were segregated and removed and kept out of, they are literally crashing and burning. You got the Dust Bowl, you got the stock market crash in 1929 and in 1930, and you got them looking over across the railroad at the Black folks who still got money, who still got convenience stores or grocery stores, who still, driving their little cars around or whatever with these suits on and this hat. And how dare you? How dare you be doing better than me? I'm gonna burn you down tonight. Which is why there's so many stories that I've heard from, matter of fact, my business partner said that her grandfather got run out of town for buying a car. He bought a shiny black car and they didn't like it. And they said, you and your car better be gone by sundown. And that's how she ended up having grandparents, because he asked for permission to take his 15-year-old girlfriend with him. And they moved from Mississippi all the way to Minnesota, trying to get away simply because he bought a car. But that jealousy, and you think about the proliferation of burned cities in the 30s, right? The late 20s and the early 30s, because it was giving lie to the whole idea of white American exceptionalism. How can you be exceptional when I'm doing better than you? Well, you're not doing better than me now. Woof. Yeah, nothing. Everything's gone.
You know, Joy, you mentioned that about your friends, how the grandparents pretty much came to be in Minnesota. Not sure if you saw it. It was either the beginning of this month or the end of March. There was a thread going around. I don't know if it was like a Twitter thread or something, but a lot of people were commenting about how, you know, their families, at least the history that they know of their families, only go back to their grandparents, because the grandparents at a young age had to leave a southern state for whatever reason, whether it was via threat or fear or retaliation, just by retaliation for an injustice done to them, and ran up north to a northern state. And that's how they became to be in their city when the rest of the family is still in a southern town.
And so everybody got cousins in the South, right? Everybody got a cousin in Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, North Carolina. Your people are somewhere down here because we all came from down here, you know? And you make a really good point about escaping to the north, the Great Migration along the railroad lines, you know? Wherever the railroads were going, that's where we were going, because it was easy to get there. And my father has 2 birth certificates, 3 days apart, because my mother decided she ain't like the name she gave him. And I didn't find out until my father died that his parents were never married, right? So his first name was Charles something Roberts, because that was his mother's last name. And then I guess when his dad decided to claim him, they changed it to Charles Robert Stevens. So there's that. But yeah, so like changing your name, being somebody else, there was no DNA, there was no fingerprints, there was none of that. It was just whoever you said you were when you came to town, that's who you were, you know? And so up and leaving, escaping, creating a whole new identity, very easy to do. Matter of fact, again, through my father's side of the family, I am related to a lot of Stephen's sons, because my father's grandfather was one of 3 brothers. And of those 3 brothers, one went into the military, and they just changed his name because somebody got it wrong on the form and they're like, it's too late. And so he became Stephen's son. And so we're related to a whole batch of Stephen's sons in the state of Florida. I actually ended up meeting one by accident at the beauty shop, right? Lo and behold, she was my 5th cousin or something. So it was wild. But name changes and things like that happen all the time. Yeah. And so it would be easy to forget. And then another thing that I remember, somebody's, you know, as we share these type of things amongst ourselves, somebody said that her grandmother said, when we talk about how come so many people don't know about Tulsa, how come so many people don't know about Rosewood, they don't know about that Central Park used to be a Black neighborhood, or like Bruce's Beach. They don't know these stories. And she said her grandmother was like, well, we didn't want to talk about it anymore. And that's also another thing. It's like when you ask someone to relay what happened, you're asking them to relive a trauma that they've never really dealt with, right? They just don't talk about it.
So in not talking about it, does it go away? Now, the thought I'm having, and been experiencing it a lot lately with clients, but also in myself, where our intuition, our vibe, our psychic sense, you know, there's many names for it, and there's a lot of different things we can call it, but there are times when we're like, don't feel right. Something don't feel right. And I believe in exploration of your own history, there's a history, you know, pointing to your intellectual mind that can remember. There might be even the histories that are written down, but then there are the histories you have no idea of. It's never been taught to you or told to you. It's not in any book. but it is the influence of ancestors, or it's the influence of it being in our bones, and we
Mm.
don't know about it, and it's still affecting us. And there are ways to get to it that are not intellectual. There are ways to get to it that involve just being in the space with the feeling. And when you're in the space with the feeling, you may get an intuition. You may get something that, I'll go Carl Jung here, speaks from a collective.
Mm.
And as I'm listening to myself right now say this, and ostensibly in public because we're on the air, I'm going, whoa, I didn't even know this 5, 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
where the access to it, and artists and musicians and people who are professional at it actually know this already, where they wait until they're really tired, it's the middle of the night, or maybe they have to take something to get them in that state, and then they get a message from someplace, and they're able to create something that blows their mind and blows ours too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and now we're talking history, and now as I work in getting people's narrative and their history, I make space for them to, I just noticed a feeling came up. Can we just be together for a moment? You don't have to talk. And when they get in that space, the conversation can go someplace that me and that person would have ever known it would have taken. But then all of a sudden, I'm having this memory about something that happened when I was 6 or in a past life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going abstract here in a space, but I thought that there is the history, So I was appreciating about what, James, when you were talking about your experiences, and then I'm having a lot of awarenesses now of histories I didn't know. But then when I finally talk to an elder, or I finally get a little evidence of something that happened, I'm like, oh, that's why I've always felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's an amazing thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I often am inviting people to not put a primacy on the verbal and in the intellectual, but then when they're feeling a feeling, to invite that feeling into awareness, befriend it. I give you an example. I was in a work situation where somebody was telling me to do something that intellectually made sense, but on some level didn't feel right. And ultimately, that didn't feel right almost was psychic, in that I knew something was up with the person they wanted me to do something with. But I couldn't have known that from the evidence. Intellectually, what I was being instructed to do was the right thing. But on a deeper level, something didn't feel right. And then when it got all straightened out, I'm like, oh, thank goodness I didn't act on this.
It's interesting. As you're talking, I'm thinking about so many different ways that we get to that. I'm reminded of, the idea of the third eye, and the fact that the more you try to open it, the easier it is to open it, and the easier it is to be in touch with those things and to recognize when something don't feel right. I'm also thinking about, I read the statistic that said we only process maybe 1/1,000,000th of the information that we get on a daily basis from a computer processing standpoint, which is why you struggle to pay attention sometimes, or you selective listen. And then sometimes you get this feeling and you don't know where you get it from, and you think you just made something up spur of the moment. But in actuality, your brain has been collating all this random bits of information that you've been catching over the course of a day, a week, 10 years, whatever it is. And patterns start to form in your back of your brain. Well, not physically, but and so all of a sudden you may make a decision or have a feeling or decide spur of the moment not to do something or to do something. And it's not impulsive. It's calculated based on all the bits of information that you have. And so I think that's a more pared down and maybe sterilized view of the third eye, the intuition, the gut. But somewhere in your body, you're getting a message, and we get conditioned to not listen to it.
That's right.
Yeah, because like you think about how little kids will run up to a stranger, but then absolutely avoid other strangers.
Mm-hmm.
They know their third eye is wide open, and textbooks will close it, logic will close it, ridicule, conditioning, bullying, all of those things will close it for you. And then you hit 50 and you stop giving a damn what other people think. And you slowly start to open it back up, right?
That's what happened.
Oh, man. Is that what it is? Okay, I got it now. I got it now. Because I have made plenty of decision where, curtain back here, my math degree and the logic of numbers and statistics and tell me, yeah, don't do this. And I'm just like, I'm going to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm. Stop buying them Funko Pops, though.
No. I am on hiatus right now. I have not bought one in almost 2 years.
Really? I'm so proud of you, James.
But that's only because I have no place to put new ones. If I get another bookshelf, then I'm gonna start buying again because I have a place to put them. I believe you.
But I think about when I came to Atlanta to start this business with my partner Jackie. She was living here or living just in the outskirts of Atlanta. I was living in Houston, Texas, and I quit my job, bought a condo in Atlanta, moved here, started a new business, seemingly on a whim. And it has been successful in a way that in my gut, know it would not have been successful in Texas. And now if we think about where we are 7 years later, trying to do DE&I in Texas, bruh, I'd be so poor and hungry. I'd be back in corporate America with my tail between my legs, trying to eke out a living, et cetera, et cetera. But here I am thriving, and most of my clients are not in Atlanta. But being here gave me the springboard that I needed, that I didn't know I needed, but I knew I needed to be here in a way that I can't explain. And I think about the connections I've made. My college friends are here, which I think was how I rationalized it to other people. But I just knew I needed to be here. I don't even live by my partner. She lives like 30 miles from me, but I need to be in Atlanta. I moved my whole life back to Atlanta. And it wasn't just because I liked living here when I was in college. I knew that it would work here. And I can't tell you what it was other than this was just right. And that's the kind of feeling that people get, when people say the spirit moves you. Oh, that's that's a religious version of it. I felt moved. I felt something move in my spirit. I felt compelled. God is telling me, okay, however you want to look at it. And I'm not discounting anybody's religion. I'm just saying that the way that we describe that phenomenon differs from person to person and experience to experience. But I think it's all a connection to the broader universe, which goes back to us keeping in touch with the stars that have gone before us, right? As your soul returns to stardust, if you will, to the universe, the heavens. What remains? What needs to stay? What do we have to deal with? Because if you think about it, you can't just keep the good times. You have to remember all of it. And so you can't cherry pick your history as much as this country would like to. And so if you don't deal with the bad times or the ugly things or the secrets that the family didn't share or the things that they said, don't talk about this outside the house. If you don't deal with those things, you can't heal from it either.
Right.
And so it continues to perpetuate generational trauma. Like I used to be one of those people that was like, I got whoopings when I was a kid. All these kids need whoopings. And now I'm in a different place, even though I don't have children. Maybe that's not the way, but I was part of that group that was perpetuating this idea that violence teaches a lesson. And now I'm like, James, I see your face over there. But now I'm like, not every kid needs a whooping. Some of them do, but not all of them. Yeah.
So yes and no. Probably okay, so maybe not a whooping, but and I say this not in a way to cause trauma because when we were growing up and throughout the 80s, it was all when our parents punished us, whether it was via whooping or taking something away, it was always this thing of, when I have kids, I'm not going to be like you.
Yeah.
Only because I watch my sister with my nephew now, and pretty much like, yeah, you pretty much turn into your parents. Like whether you have kids or not, you somewhere along the way in your 30s, I'll just leave it there in your 30s. Some may do it earlier, some may do it later, but you do turn into your parents. Like, I don't know what I was doing one time, but my mom never really in high school, I had to have everything done. I had to be on top of everything if I wanted to go out and socialize. But because I played a sport year round, hanging out during the week was pretty much a non-starter. Going out on the weekends, cool. I can get up first thing Saturday morning, as long as the lawn was cut and my room was clean. I could just bounce. It's not like I had to do my homework, but it damn sure had to be done by Sunday evening before, because I had to go to school on Monday. So yeah, there were plenty of times I come in, I would drop my bags on a Friday after practice, shower, go straight to sleep because I'm getting up Saturday morning, do what I got to do and get out the house to go hang at the mall with whatever friends I had at the time. And somewhere in my 30s, pretty much got to the point where I just didn't want to do that anymore. Like the rush to get up on a Saturday morning and go out and do stuff. And it was like, now I'm gonna sleep in. My bed is comfortable. I paid for this apartment or place that I'm currently living. If they want to hang, they'll call me. As long as I get up by noon, I can be productive for the rest of the day. It's Saturday. What am I rushing to get up for? And in some ways, that wasn't like those. I'm not gonna say restrictions, but those boundaries that you thought, once you get out the house and get to college, you can pretty much drop all that. You pretty much gradually start embracing them again because it's like I don't want to do that anymore.
You start to understand your parents a little bit more as adult people and not just your parents. Right. You start to realize, I think back sometimes, oh yeah, I can understand now why I would get on my mother's nerves. I know now why she would just be so done with me sometimes, because I would be done with me too if I was doing this on a Saturday morning. I remember, even though I've never had children, I used to coach a step team in Orlando, Florida in the early 2000s. And I remember telling a couple of those little girls, I ain't one of your little friends. And so that's a phrase that a lot of mothers, especially Black mothers, have said. I ain't one of your little friends. I don't care if you're mad. I said that too. And I did not care if they were mad, because I was already irate at the fact that I was wasting my time with these kids who didn't appreciate nothing. Yeah, all of that came bubbling out. And they weren't, but it wasn't because I had given birth. It's because I had reached the age where certain things hit different. I remember watching not Blackish, Issa Rae's show, Insecure. I remember watching the first season of Insecure, and I was probably in my early 40s, I would guess, or mid 40s when that came out. I'm trying to remember what year it came out. And I was so irritated with everybody on the cast because they were making dumb decisions and doing stupid things and being judgmental for no reason. And why this man is a good man and you messing up and blah, blah, blah. And then I remembered, they're 29.
Yes.
I'm like 40. Yeah.
We've grown.
We ain't the same.
No, we are not the same. Not the same. Because I do the same thing when I was tutoring. Because I remember how much my mom was on me as far as education. Get good grades, because put forth the effort to get good grades, because you can do better, right? And so when I'm tutoring, didn't matter the age. Well, I'm tutoring people in math, whether they're high schoolers or people going back to school, and literally the most simplest of things would be, solve for X, and it's not a complex equation. It's like 4x plus 3 is like solve for X. Okay, that's not hard. Here's the example.
I can just see it in my head that you're standing over some 8-year-old, like, if Johnny had 2 apples.
I wasn't that bad, but pretty much it's like, this problem is the same as the example we just went through. And it would literally be the exact same thing. And I'm looking at them like, how do you not understand this? We just went through the example. I explained everything they just did in the example. And it didn't matter if they were 16 or 36.
So a thing that you may not know about me is back in the 1990s, at some point I was a math teacher,
Oh,
but I was also a psychologist in training who
Ooh.
had no business being a math teacher, but was being a psychologist that happens to be teaching math.
hmm
So when you combine me coming in there with more training in psychology than I have in math, when I explain a problem to a student, the goal as a math teacher is for them to have some logical linear connection to what I was talking about. But the psychologist in me would be, after I've explained something to them, what's your experience of what we just did?
Mm.
Like, walk me through your understanding, but really walk me through your experience.
Right.
And so when we approached it that way, I would find out that 4x plus 3 equals, I forgot my math already. I was trying to think. I was actually in the fly trying to create a math problem that would work out with an even number x. But nonetheless,
hmm
I would realize, oh, I've got to teach this a different way, especially to the students that are struggling. Students that weren't struggling, they get it. They're easy
Right.
to teach. But the students that were not getting it needed something that wasn't intellectual. They needed something that got into their experience.
Hmm.
And so thinking about the arc of the whole conversation is that when you get into people's lived experience in the moment, in some parts of the world, lived experience is a polarizing term. I should be careful. But when you just have people share with you what their experience of a thing is, you start to get a window into how their history, their logic, their thinking, who they are is affecting what's going on in the moment. And in the moment, because I remember teaching math, trying to do a little tutoring session to an adult, and I wrote a math problem down and I held it up to the adult, and the adult said to me, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. And I realized they were looking at me, not the problem.
Mm.
And
So it
so
was
that got,
psychological. Hmm.
yeah, psychological, emotional, and everything else that goes with it. The list goes on. But when we as humans get really curious about what's going on for a person, I don't ask people what they think as much as I ask them what's coming up for you. Where did you just go? Where did your mind just go? So I'm thinking, if I'm tutoring somebody and they're not really getting 2 + 2 = 4, to make it super simple, the logic in me is like, how do you not get that? But the human in me is going, what's that like for you when you look at that? What are you seeing?
Mhm.
What are you experiencing? And I found that very useful, because then I would get a window into what was going on inside, which was usually a fear or a block or something that was distorting their experience from what I thought their experience should be. Shouldn't
Hmm.
even use the word distorting. It was just creating a different experience of it.
Yeah. A different view, different lens. As you're saying that, the things running through my head as you're speaking, Dr. Fritz, is like, okay, so for real, I started off with every school needs a psychologist or some practicing therapist or something on site. Then I moved into, no, everybody in the school needs some level of like intro to psych 101, something to have a basic understanding of, how to navigate that space in order to be better support for the kids that they're influencing and everything. Then I took it another step further, because at some point in my day, it's going to come back to Korea, because I'm deep into like K-pop and K-drama. But I noticed that a lot of, at least in South Korea, a lot of people do the Myers-Briggs test just as a thing that they do when they turn like 20. Everybody takes it. And it's common, like, here in the States, you might say, what's your sign? They go, what's your MBTI? And they'll say, oh, I'm INFP, I'm ENTJ, or whatever it might be. And it gives them an understanding of who they're dealing with in the moment. And I'm like, wow, if we're so busy doing standardized tests and trying to make sure people don't get free lunch, that if we did something where, even just as a basic, you need to understand someone's personality in order to communicate with them more effectively. And just started, every 10 years and check your MBTI, where you at? Oh, I'm INFJ now instead of INFP. Now I understand that you might be a little less outgoing, or whatever it might be. that would be a great tool. And again, other countries are already way ahead of us on that, But think how different it would be, especially from like a bullying standpoint, from a career standpoint. If you find out early on that you don't like being around people and you need to have things just so, maybe librarian is a better idea for you than something else, Just a thought.
I got a suggestion on something simple, because sometimes people will say, yeah, we need a psychologist. And I'm glad that you went a number of steps further. I think we all just need to understand that our experience in this moment is not the same. You both saw the movie Sinner. If I were to separate you and really get into a deep questions about the experience of the movie, y'all would give me different responses. And what stuck out for you, what you liked, things that you remember, would be based upon your history, based upon your background, your genetics, your everything. And if schools and the world were filled with us not making assumptions about what people mean by things, but being really curious, wow, can you tell me more? Can you tell me more about, well, you really like that movie? If you both tell me you like the movie, what do I know about you? Very little, other than that you like the movie. But the movie's highly rated, so I'm not surprised you like it. So millions of people like the movie. But the deeper we go into a dialogue, and I do mean dialogue on purpose, where I'm deeply working to understand the experience, like I did as a math teacher. Let me deeply understand your experience of the math. I just, when I see it, and then the person fills in the next sentence with their experience of it. So while I'm holding up a math problem that says 2 + 2, the person can't see it because the terror inside them is so great.
Wow.
That their issue in the moment is not about logic. It's about emotion. It's about a block. It's about being overwhelmed in the moment. You fill in the blank, but that story varies from person to person to person to person. So while a lot of people tell me they don't like small talk, it's the sneaky psychologist in me, but what I do is, in small talk, they tell me so much about themselves. And it's fascinating. And often in small talk, people tell me things about themselves in an unguarded way. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Can you tell me more about that? So now, Joy, if I'm out socially and I do that, you know what I'm doing.
I was about to say, you've done that to me a couple of times. You sit next to Fritz for more than an hour. You're gonna give him your life story. It's coming out of him. I noticed it on this podcast. Like, you're our special guest, and at a moment when I was talking, I was looking down like I need to make sure I let Fritz talk, because he's gonna sit there and observe and be looking at feelings and stuff again, and to make sure I'm on to you.
Yeah, and I don't hide it. I tell people, keep doing that with one another. It's only manipulative if you keep it a secret. But if it's like, hey, when you tell me something you really like, I don't just go into what I like and pile that on. I go, wow, okay, what do you like about that? And then I go another step further, another step further, another step further. And because I get bored with the simple answers. How you doing? I'm doing okay. Oh, what's okay like for you?
I never even thought about how to expand on that. Usually people say, how you doing? You doing okay? Okay, good. And you start asking like other closing questions. Mom good? Yeah. About job good? Yeah. Yeah. But the idea, what's okay like for you? Wow. That's why they pay you that big money.
And I'm saying that those are the simple things we can do with each other. Because I've had people answer, okay for me is a day that I don't want to kill myself. To okay is a day for me when nobody yells at me. Okay is a day for me where I don't hear about another atrocity in the world. The range is okay is a day that I am able to be with my kids.
Or my kids are not here.
Right.
Yeah. I want to bring it back around because we are like at about 50 minutes. And I also want to bring it back around to the why of why history is important. Everything that we talked about may seem disparate or kind of we bounce around, but if you think about it, it always comes back to, like Dr. Fritz is saying, how do you feel about this? What emotions does it bring up for you? And we talked earlier about, having to face something in order to defeat it, to overcome it, to absorb it if need be. And we think about all of the historical things that don't get talked about because other people haven't dealt with it. And so they pass down a lockbox to the next generation, and they have no real understanding of how to break that code either. But the weight is still there, right? You're still carrying around this heavy lockbox that you don't know how to open. And so being able to have a key, if you will, into the past, this is what happened. This is why we don't talk about it. And this is, what went on. This is why your grandmother's this way. This is what you saw younger, this, interpreted this way, or here's my point of view and my lens. It gives you all the different combinations you need to unpack that box you've been carrying around, and which only makes you heal. So why is a podcast like this important? Because even though we don't know individual personal histories, we may talk about a story of the Native American migration and the Trail of Tears. We may talk about the colonization of the Polynesian islands. We may talk about the riding over of Mexican lands in Western United States. We might talk about the Harlem Renaissance, whatever it might be. It doesn't always have to be traumatic, but whatever it might be, right. If we don't continue to talk about it, we don't unlock the box, right?
Yeah. Healing happens in community. And as communal beings, when we are in those spaces and just being in a healing circle, this is a healing circle we're in right now, we don't even have to always intellectually know the history, but being in that space where we can kind of crowdsource our presencing and be in relation to one another. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people, their original community circles have a lot of trauma in it. And bridges get burned, and then we're often in a diaspora, like we all are, coming from other places without knowing those histories, but we seem to find each other. And when we can just be in those same spaces, I'm breathing, my heart is beating, Moala, that's Haitian Creole for I'm here, Nula, we're here. Again, sometimes I catch myself, I'm like, who are you talking like? Because I didn't always talk this way, but I'm finding so much healing in spaces like that. When you're in community with people who you can just be with and be expressive of what's going on with you without judgment and without fear of some kind of thing happening, retaliation, that can be healing. And I often remind people you can do a thing from a place of healing, or you can do a thing from a place of hurt. Sometimes they're the same thing, but often the outcome is going to down the line be very different. So part of what excited me about being in the conversation about history is I don't know a lot of my history, but I'm discovering it every day in different spaces with different people. And I don't mean discovering it here. I mean the soul that seeks resonance doesn't even know why a lot of the times, but it's like, I'm home. I'm finding this moment with my tribe.
Wow, the soul is seeking resonance. You should be dropping some dimes over here. Amazing.
The brain is going, Fritz, I don't know where this is coming from. Because, as a doctor, they train you to make sure everything's coming from logic. Right. And I'm finding that is misleading and limiting. And so I was working with a client today, and I said something, and the client's like, what do you mean, asking for this? And I went, I don't know. That just came up. And in the moment, I'm not sure if it's my stuff or yours, but it came up, and part of me felt right to tell you. And they did something with it during their session that was really useful to them.
I've had moments like that before, and it can be really emotional for me at least. Sometimes when I feel compelled to tell, especially if I'm doing coaching and I feel compelled to tell somebody something and I don't know why I need to tell them, but okay, I got to say this to you, whatever. It usually ends with either me or that person or both of us crying or getting choked up or something. And I get goosebumps and like, I know I had to tell you this. I know that I'm telling you the truth because I'm crying. And I know I only cry when I'm telling you the truth. And so I can't explain those things, but it happens often enough for me to trust it. Like I mentioned earlier about the more you use that third eye, the more you can keep it open. When I feel that way and I feel like I need to say something, I've gotten very intentional about, let me say this. And then the goosebumps and the freaky feeling and everything comes. I'm like, I'm supposed to be saying this because I wouldn't feel this way if I didn't, I feel very shut down if I'm telling lies. I can tell lies easy. It's not hard. But when I need to say something, it's a full body happening,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This has been great. I'm looking at the time like, dang, I could do this. I could do this all night.
You mentioned earlier as far as like becoming our parents, and I just want to throw this out there. I used to do academic competitions where high Q competitions for high school kids that I would pretty much moderate. And music, not really my forte. I like music. I have other hobbies and interests I love, but I like music. There are a handful of artists I love, but I will listen to music because it is, therapeutic, whatever, but I digress. Talking to these kids who are basically high school students, anywhere between 13 to 17 years old, doing this competition. And they were talking about the best rappers. And then one of them threw out the word all time. Now, these are, again, 13 to 17-year-old kids talking about the best rappers all time. And this was roughly about 10 years ago. So they were talking about Lil Wayne and some other rappers who
don't meet that criteria.
Right. Yeah. And so myself and one of the other judges there, we were pretty much like, okay, but have you ever listened to? And we started just dropping names from like the beginning of rap and hip hop, going all the way back to like the late 70s to present day. And they were just looking at us like, yeah, we ain't heard of none of them except for maybe LL, Tupac, and Biggie.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, but you do understand that when you say all time and you're only limiting to your lived experience, you're ignoring a plethora of artists and in some cases visionaries who have great bodies of work, and you're just flat out ignoring them because it wasn't the hot thing when you were alive, while you're alive. Like, because it came before you, it doesn't matter. That's not how this works. Like, understand that the artists that you all just rattled off sample or pay homage to a lot of the artists I just named. And I didn't even listen to all their bodies of works. I know it's a lot of their, biggest hits, but I also know that those artists borrowed from other genres. And I knew that when I was listening to them then. Like, do you know where this style of, lyrical movement comes from? Not just the rap itself, but just your favorite, like your top 5. Think about the way that they arrange their flow. Do you know where it's coming from? Both from, a narrative standpoint, the way they're telling the story, and who they're emulating based on who influenced them. Like, do you know who their influences are? Is like, they're looking at me weird. Like, why does that even matter? It's like, because it helps to understand where they're coming from. That helps shape the narrative as far as what they're putting on wax, for you to listen to. And it got to the point to where they felt like we were just coming down on them and saying everything they would listen to was trash. And I had to like pause the competition before the next game started and like drop basically like a 7-minute dialogue, monologue on like the artists you listening to. No one's saying they're bad, but understand that there's a history behind it that you were flat out ignoring because the beat is good. Because that's pretty much what this time period was like, oh yeah, these beats are nice, the lyrics are kind of whack, but the beats are dope. And that's basically all they were talking about was the beats. It's like, oh yeah, you can listen to the words,
right? Can you even understand the words?
Understand what they're saying, right? And I'm just like, the beats, half of them are samples, if not more, and those samples come from people who I listened to when I was your age, who, by the way, sampled people that my parents listened to when they were your age.
There was a thread going around that said we never really left disco because disco got sampled into early rap, and then early rap gets sampled again into current rap, and so we're still doing disco.
Exactly, whether it's disco, blues, jazz, all of it got sampled into what is currently hip hop, however you want to define it. And I was giving them that lesson and trying to come from a place, and like as I was speaking, like you said earlier, there was nothing logical about my thought process. Everything from inside. And again, it's because my older cousins, because on my mom's side of the family, I'm like the fourth oldest grandchild out of like 15, 16 grandkids. So I have 3 cousins older than me, who 2 of them were heavily into music. So I listened to, my exposure to rap in the 80s was whatever they were listening to when I was around them. When I got to high school in the 90s, my exposure to rap was what my peers were listening to, because my mom didn't pretty much play a lot of rap in the car rides to where we're going. She always played Howard University's radio station, which always played jazz and R&B.
Yep. That's that's another thing that we could talk about one day, is how every HBCU had a radio station that played jazz and R&B.
So when I listened to rap in the 90s, when I'm around my peers, I can catch, oh, this is that R&B song I was just listening to the other day on Howard's radio station. So I have that knowledge all the way through. And then, like I said, some 10 years ago, I'm talking to these kids about that. And, for some of them, I could see a realization come over their face, like, okay, I get it. Like, he's exposing us to knowledge. He's speaking from a place where he's not coming down on us about our music, but he's at least trying to open our minds. And some of them just pretty much like, man, you old, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, okay, fine. I wasn't quite yet 40 at the time when I was, giving this monologue, but it's that same thing. And it's like, I hope they get to that point to where they have to do this with the next generation behind them, who's listening to artists who are influenced who they listen to, but don't even care who they are. So you have the same thing, and then it clicks, right? Type thing. And then you can speak from a place inside. Because like I said, music's not my thing. Yes, I know artists. I know certain songs by certain artists, but I can speak to it from that point, not as an expert, but just a feeling.
Now, I want to take what you've discussed here around music. And one, I'm going to give you another example, because I can't remember the young artist's name. It may be, I don't think it's Doja Cat, but it's somebody in that young female rapper / R&B genre. And she redid Hound Dog. Do you know what I'm talking about? And the way she did it was great.
Dog, yes, I haven't heard the updated version.
Yeah. And so when she came out with it, it says you ain't nothing but a hound dog and blah 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 blah, and people were like, "Oh, why she had to be sampling Elvis and blah blah blah?" And Elvis hated black people and blah, because they don't know their history. Right. Because nobody ever told him that Elvis stole that song. Well, he didn't steal it. Somebody else gave him a song that he covered that they paid. I had to go look up her name. Big Mama Thornton.
Thornton, yes.
Did that song. She got $500 for that song. And Elvis made millions off of it. It was critical to his career. And she never got another cent because they didn't own the rights to things. She sang it for them. She sang the bars. They paid her to come in and do whatever. I think she had like a local Chitlin Circuit hit, right? It's a whole long story, but it's not Doja. Whoever the artist, the current day artist was, did the homework to go back and know where that song came from and wanted to give that homage. And here we are missing the middle of the history, thinking that she's just sampling Elvis, right? That's what I love about Kendrick Lamar, like his work, I love that Kendrick got in therapy and then started producing some amazing bodies of work, because it shows in how he talks about himself. Fritz, if you don't listen to Kendrick, you absolutely should, because he talks about his, yes, okay, good. He talks about
Yeah.
his feelings and some of the ups and downs in his life, but also everything he does is intentional, similar to Ryan Coogler and all the things that he's doing with not only Sinners, but Fruitvale Station,
Yes.
Creed, et cetera, all being so intentional to make sure that there are lifelines, if you will, cast back.
There are a number of artists many artists who, and I think James, there's context in everything.
Yes.
Pop culture tends to just take the superficial and run with it and enjoy it, and that's fine, I guess. But there's context in everything. There's history in everything. And if we take the time to be curious, I think I was starting to say before, you don't have to be a psychologist to just be curious and be open to things are not just what they may seem or appear to be on the surface. Be curious about, tell me more about that. Because when you do, there were times I was listening to Jay-Z and I'm like, he read that, he's making references.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think one of the reasons why they become popular is because they provide so many hints and so many little bits of context and references in their music. They are not dumb, they are brilliant people who are connecting to a collective unconscious, a collective well of things. So when, yes, those kids are saying, oh, of all time, when you're talking to them, you're trying to open them up to, hey, before you discount everything, there's a deep well of history in what you are talking about. And if you care to do the work, which is easier than ever with all our technology, you could, be enlightened, or you could become aware. Now I'm going to go matrix on you of how, if you stay with pop culture, you're in the box, white, red pill, blue pill. But if you're willing to actually do the work, you'll find out there's so much more, and so much more that you're being influenced by and brainwashed by and affected by. Or you can just stay in here and bop to the pop.
It's so powerful what you're saying, because just yesterday I was on another podcast about Black women in nerdy spaces, and Robbie Atkinson is a new author. She is a Black woman writing manga, which historically has been anime, Japanese influence, etc. People even struggle to let American authors of any race or gender say that they are doing manga, but she's creating one. It's going to be great. And she said, you sometimes you got to step out of the box to tear it down. And she wasn't trying to be profound, but when she said that, I was like, write that down. I put it on LinkedIn this morning and tagged her, like, you got to step out of the box to tear it down. And if you don't realize you're in a box, you're defeated before you start, And that, again, goes back to listening to the ancestors. You are in a box, right? Don't stay in there. That heebie-jeebie feeling that you get is telling you to move, to do something.
So what we often refer to it as the third eye. I still come at things, being a psychologist or a doctor, concretely and objectively and scientifically, if I can use that term, where our lived experience and that intuition is real data. It's real data, but we're often in systems that have gaslit us into thinking, that intuition, I'm supposed to ignore that. I need hard, cold facts
You're
and
being
logic.
silly.
Yeah, when I was as a psychologist, I supervise people who are going for licensure, and I particularly tell students in the beginning, if your gut is ever flipping out or feeling something, don't discount it. Tell me. And they're like, expecting that I'm going to, as their supervisor, tell them to only rely upon evidence-based logic. And I'm like, yeah, you can do that. But if your gut is, and there's been so many times that we've prevented dangerous situations from happening because their gut hasn't been brainwashed into being dismissed, said, hey, I'm not feeling good about something. Ooh, tell me about it. So again, I invite people in all their relationships and even their relationships to themselves, when they get a bad feeling or a feeling that's not good or unpleasant, to not push it down or medicate it or numb it out, but to find ways to honor it and to, hey, bad feeling, what do you got for me?
You know, I want to touch on what you just said about don't push it down, don't medicate it, don't try to box it out, etc. And I think about pressure cooking. Hang with me for a second. So when even if you say I'm gonna put something on the back burner, you put the top on it, it continues to heat, it continues to expand, and eventually the top is going to pop and it's going to overflow, explode, boil over, whatever you want to call it. There's only so long that you can repress things before it will have its day. And I think about the seemingly out of nowhere proliferation of think pieces and revolting and rebellion and we're not taking this anymore and sassy attitudes out there. Audacity is a dime a pound right now on the stock market. And so collectively, and I'm looking at it from a culture of the United States point of view, collectively, we have tried to push down and box out a whole lot of stuff for a whole lot of years. And it's getting to the point where it's going to vent at some point. The question is, will it be a controlled vent or will it be an explosion? And so, yeah, it's looking like it's going to be a pop top. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And to take that a step further, Joy, us as individuals, by us, I mean men, specifically Black men, because if you are anywhere, give or take 5+, hell, if you're 50 or older, you were raised in such a way that your feelings and your emotions are irrelevant to some extent, right? Yeah, you can feel stuff, don't express it.
Unless it's in anger.
Yeah, that part. Like anger is the only outlet you have. And as I look back on even the celebrities, when they have blow-ups or outbursts or something that I've noticed, from my childhood going all the way through the 90s and early 2000s, I reflect on the falls from grace that they've had or, ended up, whether it's dead or in jail, how did that happen? It's kind of like they're of a certain age where they were raised to bottle everything up. And you can only do that for so long before, and I'm glad there's a generation of Black men out there my age, younger, who are raising their sons to actually express themselves, or at least express themselves in some type of way that's not just through anger, right. To encourage them to have conversations. One of the things I try to do with my circle of friends, guys I went to college with, even in my nerd spaces, to, check in, see how they're doing, because as men, we don't do that. You observe any guy who's been in a heterosexual relationship with a woman has been around their woman where they'll randomly call their homegirl, check on them, see how they're doing, what's going on. That conversation may start out as a 5-minute, how you doing, and turn to 2 hours of
2 a.m. still on the phone. Mm-hmm.
And we don't, as men, we don't do that. Like I find myself maybe 3 times a month reaching out to the same couple of, male friends around me, check and see how they doing, whether it's through text or a phone call or whatever, but trying to do that more often because we don't do that to each other, and I'm pretty sure my father's generation never did it. Hanging out and shooting the breeze was pretty much the equivalent of, the best they could do of that, but no one really talked about their emotions. They may talk about the stresses in their life or, how their significant other is wearing them down or constantly on their nerves and nagging or something like that, but nothing as far as where they are in their headspace as far as the struggles they're dealing with, emotionally, not from a financial standpoint, but
right.
How the emotional is weighing on them physically or the traumas that they still haven't unpacked, So we're breaking that cycle. I see that cycle being broken more and more as the generations behind us are becoming of age, but we're not quite there yet where it's a widely accepted thing, because I can still walk into a space, mixed company of my age, and say something emotional, and inevitably a person, whether it's a male or a woman, will speak and be like, "Oh, that's weak," because of how we were raised. And it's like, it's not weak to express yourself. In the same ways, like, I'm knocking 50, but I still play video games. So what?
Right. You and I are playing Diablo when we get off
right after this, right? So it's like these things of you can't do this because it is something we need to, as a society as a whole, need to get away from. But then there's those other things inside our community that we need to break as well, because it's like, well, this thing is accepted if you XYZ, but not if you ABC.
It's funny you specifically talk about calling to check on your homeboys. I remember a comedian, and I don't remember who it was, but it was a Black male comedian talking about if a guy called me and say, "Nothing, bro, I was just checking on you," he would take that as an affront to his masculinity and question the other guy's masculinity. It always comes back to that completely warped and misshapen toxic version of masculinity that says anything that even remotely touches on an emotion or a feeling or even a color, God forbid you wear something pink outside, you're no longer a man, and everybody's questioning. But all of that serves to stop us from having decent conversation. Then they wonder why men and women don't talk or can't get along nowadays. It's because I'm over here having heart-to-heart conversations till 2 a.m. with my circle of girlfriends and trying to heal us collectively. And you over here trying to have a conversation at the barbershop and dudes telling you that you gay for saying you had a hard day. Like that, those two things are never going to bring us together. But it's something that we've got to individually and collectively start talking about. And again, if you're not talking about the things that are happening around you and the things that led to you being in the headspace that you're in now, whether it's your generation or the generations that came before you, if you're not talking about this, you cannot completely heal because you're not dealing with the root causes of a lot of stuff. Yeah.
And I have secrets in my closet, so.
And that is why the healing needs to happen in community where it's discussed and debated and dialogued. I have a strong feeling and belief, though, a lot of the things that are part of culture were put in there to keep us separate and apart, intentionally and consciously. And then they become the popular thinking on that thing.
Yeah.
Like a medical procedure of using leeches, let's say, to, bloodlet. That was standard practice. So many standard practices, and they thought that was helpful. But I think there's also in our systems and our social systems, things that were infused in there to keep us apart. Keep us weak. And so we need to be talking about that. And because I have white colleagues who will reach out to check on me, and I've been working with trying to get a number of Black colleagues to do so, but it's just not in our habit.
Because either we're conditioned to stay out of somebody else's business, or don't want nobody in your business.
Yeah. So
yes to both.
So nobody in my business, nobody in your business, and we're now isolated with our own issues and struggles. But the thriving communities that got burned down probably had a better average of people being in community with each other, healing and talking and collaborating and sharing each other's business so each other's businesses would thrive.
That's another thing that has been lost behind not sharing the totality of history. If you only know there was a city and it burned down, you don't know why, you don't know how they talk to each other. You don't know, it's so far beyond just the barbershop conversations, men supporting each other. You really got to see Sinners because there's some great moments in there over and over again that speak to this. But somewhere along the way, we lost our way, And we don't have to recreate things, but we can absolutely improve on the theme if we remember what the themes were.
Yeah. The village raising a child is not a metaphor. It's what actually happened. And speak to that as well as a kid growing up, because the block where my grandmother's house was up in DC, the next block over was someone else's house, and our families, were close and everything. So it's like playing outside till the sunlights came on. If you were on the wrong block when the lights were about to come on, it was get your butt across the street.
Get in somebody's house.
Right. Either you come up here on this front porch and you stay here until your parents get to where they're going to get to and know that you're over here, or hurry up and get your butt across the street because the sun's going down, them lights about to come on.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have that anymore, because it's like we went from everybody looking out for each other to mind, like you said earlier, mind your business.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, but I understand that there can be a balance there, because it's also the type of thing of you don't want too many folks in your business,
Mm-hmm.
or the wrong folk in your business because they talk too much or they say too much or whatever the case may be. But at the same time, just completely go from everybody together to mind your business. That that staunch line, mind your business, like that. It's like two opposing extremes that we just can't.
Yeah, you also need to realize that nobody gets a parenting license, and so you don't know everything. But I will always appreciate my own intuition, right? Because when I was getting my MBA, you had to do a book project. You had to read a book and talk about it from a sales standpoint, blah blah blah. And they gave us a choice of books, and I picked The Wisdom of Crowds because it seemed like the least boring book out of all of them that I picked. And I have referenced that book hundreds of times since I got my MBA 15 years ago, right? But the premise of the whole book is, if the first example he uses in the book, if I got a jar full of jelly beans on a counter at a store or a bar or whatever, and I say, if you can guess the number of jelly beans, you win $100. Nobody on that list is going to get the exact number of jelly beans in that jar, no matter how they come at it. But if you average everything on that list, the average number is the right answer. Meaning, even though individually we don't have the exact right answer, when you bring us together collectively through all of the data that we've picked up along the way and different approaches and different lenses, we will coalesce into the right answer. And it takes community to do that, And that's probably not what he meant with that book, but that's where I take it a lot of times is, if I don't know the answer, I need to know other people that can help get me closer to the answer. But if I'm too focused on not wanting to be embarrassed, and always wanting to seem right, not appreciating other people's points of view, then I'm going to continue to be less than I can be.
And that, I would say, is another issue, to pick at least that part of it. Fear of being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with being wrong if it's unintentional. Like, you can make a statement and it be wrong, and that's not a bad thing. When you're intentionally making statements that are wrong, therein lies the problem. And I think that society as a whole has lost that. And it's like, I said something, I'm going to ride with it, and I'm going to prove it right because I don't want to be wrong.
Mm-hmm. Just wrong and strong out here.
Right. And it's like, and that gets lost, I think, in the education part, because we shun kids from just answering questions or just speaking their mind, because then they like, well, if I raise my hand and I'm wrong, I'm gonna be embarrassed.
Mm-hmm. Kids have anxiety over that.
Right. And that carries with them through the rest of their, formal educational years. And it's like, some of them if they go to, say, a college level or, advanced level education, maybe that gets broken there, maybe. But if they don't, they're stuck in that. And then whatever vocational or whatever else they do in life is kind of like, well, I don't want to speak up because I might be wrong.
Fritz, you were going to say something.
Oh, I'm enjoying the discourse, but I was thinking about how, again, I've been feeling like there are things that are infused in our systems that are wrong. Like a child doesn't know to be afraid to say something. A young child, precocious, they're playful, but there's a point at which they're afraid to say something. Something happened to them. I'm remembering first grade, second grade, raising your hand by the time you get to the third or fourth grade. something happens to us.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to a lot of the ills of society have gotten there through the systems that are in society that teach us to be dumbed down, to teach us to
Mm-hmm.
disregard whole histories, and then they become the norm. Teach us to not work with each other. Think about generational trauma of
Mhm.
all those burned communities.
Mm-hmm.
Where did all that trauma go? There wasn't a societal quest to get therapy to transcend the trauma.
Mm-hmm. No, we just all have diabetes.
So it got pushed down. We don't talk about it. And like a rebellion, it manifests itself in illness,
Mm-hmm.
in separation,
Fibroids,
in
fibromyalgia, stroke, high blood pressure, diabetes. Yeah, all the things, all the illnesses that they always give you a higher risk factor because you're Black.
and in behaviors and in cultures that, oh, to express yourself is weak. The opposite. We get
Mhm.
stronger when we get to express ourselves. Oh no,
Mhm.
can't do that anymore. And to a certain extent, there's also that trauma of, well, if we are working together and we thrive, we might get killed, we might get burnt down again.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily people's thinking, but I'm remembering how I forget where I learned about it, but it probably was during the slave trade. But if a particular child, I probably learned it from you, Joy,
Mhm.
but if a particular child or person was deemed too good, well, that was dangerous because then
Mhm.
they may get sold for a higher
Mhm.
price and separated from their family.
Mhm.
So dumb it down. No, he ain't that smart. Oh, he ain't that
Right.
strong. He
Oh, that
lazy.
fool. Mhm.
So there's
He
a
ain't good for nothing. Mhm.
yeah, if this was 1,000 years ago, I still think it would be affecting us today. But
Yeah.
this stuff is like 50, 60, 100 years
Right.
ago. These traumas are real fresh. And there
Right.
are plenty of traumas that have happened in the world that we as a country will pay attention
Mhm.
to, from atrocities in war and genocide, some of them, and then there are others where like, oh yeah, we don't talk about that because that's unimportant.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
those
I remind people from time to time when they talk about, why don't y'all get over that was so many years ago. That was 500 years ago. Okay, first of all, the country's not that old. Even though we predate the country, but slavery officially ended in 1865. Jim Crow extended it to some form of fashion until the 1950s, another 100 years, right? And so, first of all, my parents were adults in the 1950s, but my great great grandmother was the daughter of an enslaved person. That's not that long ago. It is possible that I met my great grandmother when I was a child. Her mother was the daughter of a slave. So that's tangible, you know? And to think about, oh, y'all should, it's real funny to me. I'm just be cynical for a second. It's real funny to me that the same people telling us we need to get over slavery reenact the Civil War every year.
Yep.
Get over that.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that
So
wasn't
you
about slavery. That was about states' rights.
Again, if you don't have the full recounting of history, people will start to believe that. There are folks that have no idea what went on 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 20 years ago, you know?
The funny thing about all those states' rights folks, all the people they quote, love as great leaders, whatever, wrote down that it was about slavery.
Right. We're going to war because we don't believe Negroes deserve anything.
That was the rights they were talking about. You just stopped at states' rights, but it's states' rights to own slaves.
We won't even talk about Texas leaving 2 whole countries behind trying to hold on to slavery. They left Mexico because Mexico outlawed it and joined the United States, and then they seceded from the Union, trying to hold on to slavery. A mess. But that's a whole different podcast. We'll talk about that later. I want to wrap this up, and so I'm not going to end it abruptly. I want to ask both of you what made you think tonight, like what was said or done that popped a triggered a memory for you or made you think, you know what, that is true? Like, what epiphany did you have? What are you taking away from this conversation?
I'll say this. I have a therapy session tomorrow. So thank you, Dr. Fritz. More ammunition. When I talk to my therapist. Just reflecting on trying to remember a lot of the stories that were told to me by my grandparents. I barely remember my father's mother. She passed away like before I was 10. And then the next grandparent passed away was my father's father, who passed away shortly after my mother's mother passed away before I graduated high school. And my grandfathers, I think, passed away within like 3 years of each other after I finished college. So, and I keep trying to think back because my grandmothers were the ones who pretty much talked the most to me when I was around them, growing up. Like I said, I don't remember much from, my father's mother because I was so young when she passed away. But my mother's mother, she would summer breaks between, grade school, be at her house all, from basically my mom's working hours. She'd drop us off over there, pick us up when she got off work. That was pretty much daycare, if you will, until the summer program started, and just listening to her. I probably should have asked her about the song she was always humming when she was going about the house, before she started watching the stories or whatever, whether they were actual hymns or something else. Could have picked her brain more for, why she did things a certain way, as far as, her routine, as far as, she would, I think up until we hit middle school, she was always cooking breakfast, in the mornings for us, expecting us to come over. She didn't have to do that because my mom would pretty much feed us before we left the house, but it'd be another breakfast there, because once we got to high school, it's pretty much we were on our own. But, things of that nature is like, and you don't think about it at the time because I'm like 12 years old.
Right.
I'm like,
your mind is on like toys and food. Right.
Like, do I have my favorite Transformer G.I. Joe action figure with me? Yes. Can I keep myself occupied for the next 8 hours, while I'm in the house with her? Can I stay out her way long enough to not be bored or whatever have you? Because, I'm 12. She's a 70-plus-year-old woman. And I'm like, what's,
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know what you're missing, basically. Right. You don't realize that everything is permanent when you're 7. She's always going to be here. It's always going to be like this. Never grow up, never land, all that kind of stuff. And then one day you look up an adult and you're like, I wish I had paid more attention, or I wish I had, I would give anything to be able to find that recording of my grandfather and my grandmother talking about growing up, about living a life, in the 30s and 40s. It was I'm talking old school cassette player where you had to push the 2 buttons down.
Yes.
Yeah. Never find that again, but that's what
I will say this though. She did tell me one thing about my grandfather was that the way he got, because my grandfather's from Belize, my mother's father is from Belize, not half American, like direct. His first trip over here to America was because he was playing hide and seek with his cousins and hid on a boat. They found him mid-trip and they weren't turning back.
Wow.
So he came. That's how he first came to America. He was playing hide and seek with his cousins and hid on the boat, and they found him mid-trip. After they docked and everything, and they went back to Belize is when they dropped him off.
How long was he gone?
She didn't get that much of the story.
It had to be a couple weeks.
Of course, it was a couple of weeks.
Wow.
But yeah,
they just thought he was dead. Him dead and just gone.
I don't know what the family thought when they realized he was missing. But she told the story so casually with I'm just like, wait, he did what? I was more concerned with hide and seek because she said this story and I think I was in high school, maybe early years of college when I was still going home for the summer. And she said that she was like, yeah, your grandfather, was playing hide and seek. And I'm like, wait, me and my sister just looking at her and our jaws dropped. We didn't even think about the consequences of what did the family think? No, we didn't ask that question. So we still don't know or how long he was missing. It was just, and that's the part of the story that stood out still. So yeah, I still know that to this day.
Fritz, I'm gonna come to you.
I am thinking about in the moment how in the last 10 years and I think we're people of a certain age where this happens, where a lot of people have died, no longer with us, transitioned. And the most important time for us is now, with whoever we have remaining, to get those stories and to take the opportunities to learn and connect and be in community. Because the less we do that, the more we'll regret it in the future. I wish I had did more of. And I've been with each loss, taking that advice and following it. And so there are many instances where someone is no longer with us. But I did have a lot of the taking advantage of them while they were around in a good way and sharing with them and being with them. So that sticks out for me, that in this moment, the most important thing we can do is fully be present.
You know, I'm going to take that and run with it, because I got a family reunion coming up this summer, and I am going to recreate that project from when I was in elementary school and ask all of the elders at the family reunion to tell us about your life growing up. And because it didn't start in the 60s. People, sometimes you ask people about what their life was like, they're going to hit you with the marches and, you know, the boycott and Selma, et cetera. Hey, you was born in 1928. I'm gonna need to know what happened from 1929 to 1969, you know? Right. So I think I'm gonna make that a project that me and the other, so you stay at the kids' table until you have children. So I'm still with the children at 51. But I'm going to take that to my family reunion and see if I can't do some more recorded history that way.
Yeah. I should probably start doing that when I go home for the holidays, because again, my mom is one of 6. So when her and her siblings get together and something pops off between any 2 of them, I just pretty much like pull up a chair and I'm like, all right, let's see what dumb stuff y'all did when y'all was my age. You know,
they be spilling all the tea, you know?
Right. Like,
that's why you got locked out the house when you snuck out when you was 12. Like, woo, auntie.
That. You say that jokingly. Yes, there are stories. Again, there were 6 of them. Stories like that exist.
You know why you bullshitting? I am 51. I am becoming an elder, and so I need to make sure I don't keep my stories to myself either. I got some rowdy stories from college, but even beyond that, I got stories from middle school, elementary school, what it was like being a smart Black girl in the 70s and early 80s in Houston, Texas. Like, there's things that I'm a part of the history.
Yes.
And, you know, we can't forget that either. I'm not trying to discount what I plan to do with my elders at my family reunion, but I got a story to tell too. And so we should try to keep it as continuous as possible. Yeah.
And that's what I try to do with my cousin's kids and my nephew, who will be turning 6 tomorrow. You know, when I see him and he's, you know, at my mom's house or whatever, he looks around and sees pictures. He's like, because he saw when I was home for Christmas, he saw both mine and my sister's, his mother's high school graduation photos, and just looked at them. And he looked at my photo and looked at me. I was like, yeah, that's me when I graduated high school. And he was like, who's the girl beside you? I was like, that's your mother. And then below that is a picture of my sister when she was his age with our grandfather, the one from Belize. He's like, well, who's the girl in that photo? I was like, that's your mom when she was your age.
Yeah.
He looked like jaw dropped, like you can see like shock come over his face. Like, because again, as a kid, when you're like 5, 6, it's hard to imagine your parent being your age because they're old pretty much your whole life.
Right. I remember distinctly saying something when I was maybe in my 20s, like something. They old, they like 65 old. And my mom was like, I'm 65. And I was like, I don't know how to get out of the house.
Oh man.
Well, I think we should probably wind it up because it is getting late, and you know, Dr. Fritz has to go to work in the morning. So I just want to say this has been, as usual, I've never been in a space with Dr. Fritz and haven't felt healed a little bit, either by design or by accident, but either way it works. And so it's been a pleasure and honor and a privilege to have spent some time with you this evening. Thank you for coming on the show with us. Thank you for your insight, and your voice always feels like a warm blanket when you talk. And I'm just glad you're here. And so, James?
Yeah. Thank you again, Dr. Fritz, for joining us this evening. It has been fun and educational. Like I said, I might have a little bit more to discuss with my therapist tomorrow.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be here with you. And like I said before, healing happens in community. So I feel somewhat blessed to have had this experience with you.
Well, you're now officially part of the Moana Nui community, and we hope to have you back at some other point. Absolutely. And for everybody that was listening and watching this on replay, thank you all for being with us tonight. Hope that you continue to get into THIStory with us as we do this on a monthly basis. And so thank you, everybody, and y'all have a good night.
Good night.
So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will.
If this the land of the free, it was a freedom then. When they annexed Hawaii and called it Cedar Lands, without any type of payment and no signing off, called themselves a republic in 1894. 1.2 million acres overtaken from the native Hawaiians. When they resisted, the West retaliated in violence and erasure. The Hawaiian language is banned as part of colonialism's plan to expand,
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe. As a part of their ongoing war with Asia, used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No regard for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. We will.
So if we put Hawaii into perspective, well, Black and Asian history is interconnected. Considering the fight with the Pacific, then of course versus Asia, they was treated as a middleman for war, but didn't let the Western colorism run its course. Cause dark skin was a sign of dignity to core. The land was taken in the name of capitalism, when prior to it was an actual kingdom. Clap back at the system.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe. As a part of their ongoing war with Asia, used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No regard for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. We will.